Hey guys, tonight we start with one of the strangest truths you may have never heard. A single pinch of black pepper, the kind you casually twist from a grinder onto your eggs, once held the value of gold. Imagine that. Something you scatter over popcorn or soup tonight could once buy you a new cloak, a cow, maybe even the favor of a noble if you were bold enough to barter. That's how powerful spice was in the medieval world, and it's why kingdoms plotted, merchants schemed, and entire empires bent themselves around the trade routes carrying it. And here's the puzzle I want you to sit with as you settle in. Why would a tiny, wrinkled berry plucked from vines thousands of miles away be worth more than silver coins hammered in royal mints? Why would families risk deserts, storms, and pirates just to deliver a cargo of saffron threads lighter than a loaf of bread? And most mysteriously, what did these flavors actually mean to people who rarely ate more than bread, porridge, or salted meat? Tonight, you'll drift with me across caravans, markets, and candlelit feasts to find out. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it for you? Drop it in the comments below, and let's see how far this story travels while the world sleeps. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn down the volume for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk in your mind through a medieval street. Cobblestones damp beneath your boots, the scent of wood smoke in the air. Stalls crowd the lanes, hawking dried fish, bread, a few limp onions. And then one stand glows differently. Small cloth packets, tied neatly, guarded by a man whose eyes dart side to side. He isn't selling loaves or salted meat. He is selling fragments of faraway lands, a twist of cinnamon bark, a jar of peppercorns, a few threads of saffron, so delicate they look like sunbeams caught in a jar. And people are whispering, leaning close, offering coins that jingle like they weigh far too much for so little in return. You lean in too, wondering why, and you hear the gossip. In Venice, nobles sprinkle pepper across whole roasted birds, not because it tastes good, though it does, but because it shows off their wealth. The more pepper, the louder the message. I can afford to eat what you cannot. In a world where a common meal is thin gruel, that is a flex louder than trumpets. By the 13th century, Venice controlled nearly 80% of Europe's spice trade, becoming rich not on ships or armies alone, but on black pepper measured in sacks. Pepper was so valuable that city ledgers sometimes listed it as currency, accepted for rent, taxes, even as bribes. Historians still argue whether kings genuinely loved the taste or simply adored the prestige. Now, picture yourself at a feast in Paris around the year 1300. The hall is warm, torchlight flickering, meat sizzling on spits. Servants parade out a boar, glazed, dressed with herbs, and here comes the extravagance, covered with a dusting of spice. Guests ooh and ah, and you can almost hear one knight muttering, he's wasting a fortune on seasoning when the castle walls could use repair. But that's the point. Spice was medieval Instagram. Flashy, public, designed to make others jealous. You wonder, why not just grow it closer? But pepper vines thrived only in the steaming forests of India. Cinnamon came from Sri Lanka. Nutmeg? Only the Banda Islands, tiny specks far across seas most Europeans never dreamed of. Each journey required months of camel caravans across deserts where sand could swallow you, or ships through monsoon gales that could break masts like twigs. By the time spice arrived, Every grain carried stories of danger and survival. No wonder each peppercorn was practically a jewel. Now, pause a moment. Think about your own kitchen shelf. There's probably a shaker of pepper sitting casually beside the salt, maybe a dusty jar of cinnamon pushed back from last Thanksgiving. You don't guard them. You don't whisper about them. Yet here in the medieval world, that same jar could be your entire savings. You stroll further down that imagined street. A monk hurries past, clutching a pouch of saffron destined for the abbey's infirmary. Because spice wasn't just food, it was medicine. Ground cinnamon for coughs, saffron for melancholy, cloves pressed against aching teeth. Some cures worked a little, some not at all, but belief was strong. And in an age before antibiotics, sometimes belief itself healed. Some medieval texts even prescribed pepper mixed with honey as a love potion, though whether it worked or just left your date coughing is anyone's guess. As you walk, you hear the echo of debate across centuries. Were spices really treasured for flavor, or simply for the status they conferred? Historians still argue whether Europeans truly had bland palates craving heat, or whether the desire for spice was a social performance. Maybe both. Either way, tonight you are in that world where a handful of black spheres, shipped from jungles you will never see, could transform not just your dinner, but your destiny. And as you breathe in the sense of this imagined street, you realize we're only at the beginning of this story. The caravans are coming, the markets are waiting, and the Silk Road itself is unrolling before your tired eyes like a map under candlelight. You trudge with the caravan now, boots sinking into sand that stretches in every direction. The air is dry, lips cracking, your tongue searching for the sip of water you ration. Ahead, the long line of camels sways like ships on a golden ocean. Each animal carries wooden chests bound with rope, and though they look ordinary, you know inside are treasures. Their weight, not measured in iron or jewels, but in tiny curls of cinnamon bark and sacks of peppercorns, as black as midnight. The caravan stretches for miles. Dust rises with every step, clinging to your hair and stinging your eyes. You hear the jingling of bells tied to camel necks and the occasional shout of a driver urging beasts onward. It is monotonous, even maddening. Yet every man here knows the rewards. One pouch of saffron threads could be traded for a horse. A chest of pepper might buy land. The risk is brutal, but the promise is intoxicating. You wipe sweat from your brow and glance at the man beside you, a grizzled trader from Damascus. He leans toward you, whispering of bandits lurking in rocky passes. You tense, imagining thieves slipping out from behind boulders, blades flashing, all for the chance to seize a sack of spice worth a noble's ransom. Some caravans actually employed professional storytellers, people whose job was to keep guards awake at night with tales and jokes so they didn't nod off. Historians still argue whether this was effective security or just a way to kill time until someone yelled ambush. Day after day you march, and the world seems reduced to three elements: heat, dust, and the rhythmic groan of camels. By the 11th century, these caravans linked China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean in a fragile web of trade. Silk, porcelain, jewels, and above all spices flowed westward, while silver, wool, and glass trickled east. The Silk Road wasn't a single road at all, but countless veins across deserts and mountains, pulsing with the lifeblood of commerce. At night, you collapse by the fire. Sparks drift into the star-splattered sky. and men chew on hard bread softened with dates. Someone pulls out a tiny pouch, sprinkles a pinch of spice into a pot of watery stew, and suddenly the meal is transformed. You taste it too, marveling at how a mere dash lifts the flavor, warms the tongue, fills you with energy. You realize this is why people risk death, not because they must, but because life without flavor feels like survival without joy. You notice a boy no older than 15 curled up by the fire. He watches the traders with wide eyes, his future tied to this caravan. He will inherit the route, learn every well and oasis, memorize every trick of the dunes. For him, the desert is not a barrier, but a map written in shifting lines of sand. You smile, then cough, as smoke fills your lungs, and you wonder how many have coughed their last on this road. Somewhere far to the east, spices are being harvested, pepper picked green and dried in sun, cinnamon peeled from inner bark, saffron flowers plucked thread by nimble fingers. It's hard to imagine such delicate work connecting to your blistered march across the wasteland. Yet without one, the other cannot exist. The desert night turns cold, bone-chilling after the furnace of day. You wrap your cloak tighter and think of Venice nobles dining under painted ceilings, scattering peppercorns like snow. It feels absurd. You're risking your hide so some duke can show off at a banquet. And yet, you laugh softly. Isn't that always the way? Someone struggles, someone else brags, and the world keeps spinning. As dawn breaks, the caravan stirs, bells jangle again, and you heave yourself up, feet sore, stomach tight with hunger. The journey is endless, but there's no turning back. Ahead lies Baghdad, the great market where spices fetch dazzling prices. You quicken your pace, heart pounding with anticipation. And as you trudge onward, you remember the whispered saying among traders, "A man who carries pepper carries fire." Every sack of fortune balanced on the back of a camel, and the Silk Road itself feels alive, breathing, dangerous, and irresistible. You arrive in Baghdad now, feet sore but eyes wide, and the shift is immediate. After weeks of empty sand, the city feels like a living miracle. Minarets rise like spears into the sky. Domes gleam in the morning sun, and the air vibrates with noise. Donkeys braying, merchants shouting, coins clinking, and somewhere, the distant call to prayer. You inhale and nearly choke, because the scent is overwhelming. Roasted lamb, hot bread, perfumes of rosewater, and yes, spice. Not just the pepper you've trudged through deserts for, but cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, saffron, nutmeg, all mingling in a heady cloud that makes your stomach rumble, even if your purse is thin. You wander into the bazaar, a labyrinth of stalls covered in faded awnings. Rugs hang like tapestries, silks shimmer in the sun, and jewelers hold up bangles that flash like captured fire. Yet it's the spice merchants who draw the tightest crowds. Their stalls glow with color, saffron in tiny glass jars like captured rays of dawn, pepper piled in neat pyramids, cinnamon bark curling like rolled parchment, turmeric glowing yellow as a summer field. You can't help but lean closer, nose twitching, fingertips itching. The merchants are no fools. They guard their wares like hawks, eyes sharp, voices smooth as honey. One man holds up a peppercorn between thumb and forefinger as though it were a diamond. Another lets you taste a pinch of ground clove on your tongue. Sweet, fiery, almost numbing. The crowd gasps, murmurs, coins jingle. Baghdad in the 9th and 10th centuries was one of the greatest trading hubs in the world. Its markets famous for spices that came from as far as India, Sumatra, and China. Wealth flowed through its gates. And scholars wrote about how pepper was weighed like gold dust. You pause near a stall where a crooked old merchant spins tales as easily as he weighs pepper. He claims cinnamon comes from nests of giant birds, stolen at great peril by daring men. The crowd listens, half laughing, half believing. Medieval spice lore is full of such fanciful myths. Some said cinnamon sticks were fished from deep lakes guarded by monsters. Others swore peppercorns had to be harvested while still fiery on the vine, lest they burn through the bags. Historians still argue whether these myths were clever marketing tricks by traders or genuine misunderstandings passed along caravan to caravan. You slip deeper into the market, and the noise swallows you whole. Bargaining is everywhere. Voices rise, hands wave, men argue, then laugh and clap backs when a deal is struck. You can almost feel the tension in the air, because here, fortunes change in an instant. One sack of saffron threads, smaller than a child's pillow, could fetch the price of a house. One chest of pepper could pay a soldier's wages for years. Yet all of it rests on trust, on weights, measures, oaths sworn before witnesses. You wonder how many sacks are cut with sawdust, how many jars of saffron are dyed impostors. Fraud is as old as trade itself. The sun beats down, sweat trickles down your back, but your senses won't let you leave. Every corner reveals another wonder. Candied ginger that crackles on your tongue. Dates stuffed with walnuts and dusted with cinnamon. Bread fresh from ovens, its crust brushed with oil and sesame. And in the shadows, you catch a glimpse of something else. Men passing small packets under cloaks, muttered words, quick exchanges. Smuggling lives even here under the city's nose. Some poor guard will go home tonight sneezing from pepper dust, wondering why he didn't demand a cut. Night falls, and Baghdad glows with lanterns strung like stars across the bazaar. The market doesn't sleep. Storytellers gather crowds, spinning tales of far-off India, where pepper vines climb endlessly toward heaven. Children giggle, old men nod, and traders count coins with smiles they try to hide. You feel dizzy, not from the heat now, but from the sheer wealth of sensation. This is not just commerce, it's theater, it's magic, it's the pulse of the medieval world. And as you leave the bazaar, heart pounding, the thought hits you. You're standing in the center of a web that stretches across continents. Caravans feed it, ships sustain it, and in the halls of Venice and Paris and London, nobles will soon feast on what you smelled today. But here, in Baghdad, you've seen the true face of spice. Rare, coveted, myth-wrapped, and powerful enough to shape destinies. You step now from the deserts and bazaars into the echoing alleys of Venice, where the air smells less of sand and camels and more of salt, tar, and fish. The Adriatic laps against stone piers, gulls wheel overhead, and bells from St. Mark's ripple through the air. But down by the docks, the noise isn't sacred, it's commerce. Crates slam, ropes creak, merchants shout, and you're in the middle of one of the busiest spice ports the medieval world has ever known. Your boots crunch on damp planks as you weave past barrels of herring, stacks of lumber, and suddenly, there they are, sacks of pepper unloaded from galleys. They look plain, burlap, tied with rope, but everyone here knows those lumps might as well be treasure chests. Men in doublets with feathered hats lean close, fingers twitching to count coins, voices dropping as deals begin. By the 14th century, Venice controlled nearly all spice imports into Europe, thanks to its privileged trade links with the Levant. The Venetian Senate regulated the trade so carefully that pepper was nicknamed the black gold of Venice. The city's wealth glittered not from mines, but from these wrinkled little berries hauled up from Indian coasts and funneled into Europe. You watch a scene unfold. A broker in velvet gloves carefully unties a sack, lets peppercorns spill into his palm. The crowd presses in, noses twitching, eyes glinting. He announces a price so outrageous you nearly laugh, except no one does. They nod solemnly, adjust their purses, and start bidding higher. The air is thick with anticipation, as if this were a theater show and not just trading beans that make your steak taste zesty. Somewhere in the background, a dockhand mutters, "For that price, I'll just sneeze on my dinner and pretend it's pepper." You trail after one of the richer merchants, up marble steps into a counting house lined with ledgers. Inside, clerks scratch with quills, tallying figures that boggle the mind. Pepper is listed beside silver, saffron beside jewels. Transactions are whispered, deals signed, fortunes gambled. Venetian brides sometimes receive dowries measured in peppercorns. Imagine being told, "Congratulations, your husband is rich. He owns 30 pounds of seasoning." Historians still argue whether these pepper dowries were symbolic tokens or literal transfers of spice. Either way, they tell you everything about how absurdly valuable pepper had become. Outside, gondolas glide under bridges, carrying chests bound for noble houses. In palazzos along the canals, kitchens bustle. Servants prepare extravagant meals, roasted peacocks stuffed with raisins and almonds, stews thick with wine, and into each dish, a heavy hand dumps spice, sometimes so much the original flavor vanishes. You shake your head. It's less about taste, more about showing off. A lord doesn't sprinkle pepper to enjoy it. He pours pepper to prove he can. Meanwhile, down by the docks, smaller merchants eye the leftovers. They haggle for crumbs, scraps, anything to resell inland. The pepper they carry will travel by mule into German towns, by barge along the Rhine, by cart into Paris. Each middleman adds a pinch of profit, until by the time the pepper hits a peasant's stew, its cost rivals a day's wages. As you walk away from the frenzy, you glimpse the darker side. A fight breaks out. Two men accusing each other of short weights. Knives slash, blood splashes, and the crowd scatters. Guards rush in, truncheons swinging, and you realize spice doesn't just build wealth, it breeds violence. In fact, Venice's monopoly bred envy across Europe. Other cities fumed, their nobles sneezing into bland soups, while Venetians strutted with saffron yellow robes and pepper-spiced meat. The sun dips low, casting molten light over canals. The city glitters, its towers proud, its wealth humming. But you feel the tension under the surface. For all their ledgers and palazzos, Venetians know their power depends on keeping the spice flowing. One blockade, one empire closing a strait, and the glitter could vanish. Yet for now, they thrive, fat and smug on peppercorns. As you lean on a railing, watching gondolas bob in twilight, you smile. You've walked deserts, markets, and now docks, and everywhere, the story is the same. Spice is power. Spice is wealth. Spice is risk. And tonight, in Venice, you see how one city turned wrinkled berries into palaces of marble and canals of gold. You slip into the great hall of a castle now, where torches hiss and tapestries glow in the flickering light. The long oak table stretches so far, you almost have to squint to see the end. And every inch of it is loaded with spectacle. Trenchers of roasted birds, pies so heavy their crusts sag, stews simmering in bowls of silver. Yet your eyes are drawn not to the size of the feast, but to the dusting on top, the faint shimmer of saffron, the black speckles of pepper, the warm brown of cinnamon. You realize this isn't just dinner. This is a performance of power. Servants obey, their faces impassive, while guests exchange impressed glances. One murmurs, "He seasons like a king," and you nearly laugh, because that's exactly the point. In this hall, spice is less about taste and more about status. Joke number 1 tonight. Somewhere, a poor cook mutters, "That deer died twice, once in the hunt and again under a mountain of pepper." By the high Middle Ages, lavish banquets in Europe became showcases of wealth, and spices were the star props. Nobles competed to outdo each other in how extravagantly they used pepper, saffron, and ginger. In some feasts, dishes were dyed bright yellow with saffron, simply for visual shock value. A servant sets down a dish of rice, tinted gold with saffron threads, so precious that each one had been plucked by hand from the crocus flower in far-off fields. The guests gasp. The ladies cover their mouths in delight. You taste it, and it's fragrant, floral, faintly bitter, unlike anything else. For a moment, you understand why nobles paid fortunes. Then you remember the peasants outside, gnawing on barley bread, and the contrast hits you hard. Some medieval cookbooks actually warned against overusing spice. Not for cost, but because guests might start to suspect the cook was hiding spoiled meat. Pepper and cinnamon could mask a whiff of rot, after all. Historians still argue whether this was genuinely common practice or just a slander spread by those jealous of noble kitchens. Either way, you imagine biting into a bird that's past its prime, cloaked under saffron and cloves. You shiver, then chuckle. Nothing like a rotten chicken dressed up in silk. You look around the table and notice the subtle hierarchy of spice. Nobles pile it high, knights use it sparingly, and servants taste only what lingers on scraps. Even within the same hall, pepper divides people into classes. You can almost hear the muttered envy. "If only I had one pinch more." The Lord raises a goblet, boasts of a shipment arriving soon from Alexandria, and the hall erupts in cheers. It's not wine he's toasting, it's spice. You realize these people dream not of harvests or hunts, but of ships and caravans bringing sacks of flavor from unseen lands. Their fantasies are measured in peppercorns. And here's the irony you can't shake. The nobles barely taste the meat under the avalanche of spice. Flavor is drowned, tongues burn, noses run, and still they clamor for more. It's as if the more they lose the true taste of food, the louder they proclaim their victory. You smirk. Some things never change. People will always ruin a good meal just to look impressive. As the feast winds down, musicians strike up, goblets clink, and platters are carried off, half untouched. You linger at the edge of the hall, struck by the waste. Outside, in villages, children scrape bowls for crumbs. Inside, whole birds lie cold, their saffron glory wasted. The contrast is stark, unsettling. But you know this imbalance fuels the story. Because the nobles' hunger for spectacle will keep caravans trudging across deserts, keep ships sailing into storms, keep cities like Venice thriving. And somewhere in all that glitter and excess lies the reason spice changed history. You step out into the night air, ears ringing with laughter, still echoing from the hall. The stars are sharp overhead, the wind cool on your face, and the faint tang of saffron clings to your lips. Tonight, you've seen how spice could dazzle a hall, silence envy, and turn dinner into theater. Tomorrow, you'll see the other side. the hunger of those who could only dream of such flavors. You step away from the echoing laughter of castle halls and into a village lane, where the scent is not saffron or cinnamon, but wood smoke, damp hay, and the sour tang of boiled cabbage. Chickens scatter underfoot, dogs bark lazily, and a woman bends over a pot suspended above the hearth. You peer inside and see thin gruel bubbling, flicked only with a carrot and maybe a shred of salted pork. This is dinner for most of Europe, plain, filling, but without a whisper of exotic spice. You sit on a bench and watch as children slurp eagerly, not complaining, just grateful to eat. Their eyes widen when you mention pepper, and they giggle as though you've spoken of unicorns. For peasants, pepper is not seasoning. It is rumor, myth, something nobles brag about but never share. Joke number 1 tonight. One boy grins and says, "If pepper makes food taste better, can it make my chores taste better too?" His mother swats him with a rag. In medieval Europe, the vast majority of people never tasted imported spices in their entire lives. Their meals were built on cereals, root vegetables, and preserved meats. Salt was the true staple, essential for survival, not luxury. A pinch of pepper was so costly that only churches, noble houses, or wealthy merchants could occasionally afford it. For everyone else, it was as unattainable as a crown. You follow the woman into her cottage, low-ceilinged and smoky. She opens a wooden chest, and your heart leaps. Inside is a tiny pouch of saffron, gifted by a passing priest. She touches it reverently, almost fearfully. She explains she saves it for childbirth or for illness, because spice isn't just food, it's medicine, talisman, miracle. She dares not waste it on stew when it might save a life. Some households hung peppercorns or cloves in little bags around children's necks, believing the aroma warded off plague. Whether it worked or just made them smell like soup is another matter. Historians still argue whether common folk truly believed in these charms, or whether it was just a desperate gesture when real cures failed. You step outside again, and the night is cold. A peasant man leans on his spade, shaking his head at the thought of nobles dumping saffron into rice. He mutters, "They might as well burn coins in the fire." His words carry a bitter truth. What is play for the powerful is survival lost for the poor. And yet even he admits, if a pouch of pepper fell into his lap, he would sell it, not taste it. Hunger teaches pragmatism. The church bell tolls, and villagers file toward the chapel. You join them and notice incense curling in the air, its perfume rich and sweet. The priest swings a censer, and the scent fills your lungs. It's frankincense, another import, another spice-like treasure. Here, it isn't flavor, but holiness, rising smoke meant to carry prayers heavenward. Even peasants, who will never taste saffron, still inhale a touch of distant lands during Mass. Later, by the glow of the hearth, you watch a family tear bread into bowls, ladle and stew, and share with quiet gratitude. The children lick their fingers, happy. For them, spice is not necessary. Warmth, togetherness, a full belly. These are riches enough. You realize that while nobles flaunt saffron, peasants survive on resilience. And yet, in the quiet, you hear a dream whispered. One girl tells her brother, "Someday, I'll taste the gold rice." He laughs, shakes his head, but you can see the spark in her eyes. Even if only stories, spices have reached her imagination. And imagination can be as sustaining as bread. You close your eyes, feel the rough bench beneath you, the smoke stinging your nose, and you understand. Spice divided medieval life as sharply as any wall or sword. Inside castles, it dazzled. In villages, it remained legend. But both worlds were bound to it. one by extravagance, the other by longing. You leave behind the muddy lanes of the village and climb aboard a creaking ship, its deck slick with seawater, its sails snapping in the wind. The smell of tar, salt, and fish fills your nose, but beneath it all, spice. Somewhere below deck, carefully sealed in barrels, lie sacks of pepper and bundles of cinnamon bark, guarded as if they were relics. The sea trade has begun, and you're sailing with it. The crew bustles, tying ropes, chanting as they haul sails, and you stagger with the sway of the hull. A sailor grins and says, "Don't worry, landwalker. The sea only chews you up on the first few days." You laugh weakly, clinging to the railing, while gulls scream overhead. Joke number 1. You think to yourself, if I live through this voyage, I'll never complain about bumpy wagon rides again. By the 12th century, maritime spice routes across the Indian Ocean had become as vital as land caravans. Monsoon winds carried dhows from India to Arabia, and Venetian galleys sailed from Alexandria into the Mediterranean. These sea lanes sped up trade, lowered some risks, and fed Europe's insatiable hunger for flavor. At night, you watch stars wheel overhead, and the navigator points with calloused fingers, tracing lines invisible to you but etched into his memory. The ship rides the swells, and you realize the voyage depends less on maps and more on wind, instinct, and courage. Below deck, sailors gamble with dice carved from bone, singing songs of ports where pepper is piled higher than men. You lean against a barrel and imagine the cinnamon within. Some sailors believed cinnamon bark gave protection against storms, so they tucked pieces into their clothing. Historians still argue whether this was sincere faith or just wishful thinking from men terrified of drowning. Either way, you hold a piece of bark to your nose and pretend it steadies the roll of your stomach. Storms break suddenly on these waters. One night, clouds swallow the moon, rain lashes the deck, and the ship pitches violently. Men shout, sails rip, water floods. You cling to a mast, heart pounding, as the thought crashes over you. All of this chaos for spice, not for survival, not for faith, but for the promise of flavor on a nobleman's plate. And yet, you understand, if one voyage succeeds, the prophet could buy more ships, more lives transformed. The storm passes, dawn breaks, and the sea gleams gold. The crew cheers, wringing water from their clothes, laughing at the terror that nearly drowned them. They pour out a little wine in thanks, then get back to work. Trade waits for no man, no storm. Days later, the coast of Arabia rises on the horizon. Palms sway, markets beckon, and smoke curls from cooking fires. You can almost smell the spice waiting there, stronger even than the salt in your nose. You realize that every crashing wave, every pulled rope, every sleepless night has carried you closer to that treasure. As the ship glides into harbor, you lean on the railing and whisper to yourself, "The sea has opened a new road for spice. One faster, one hungrier, one that will change the world." And you are here, watching it begin. You disembark at last, boots sinking into the dust of a war-torn road. The year feels heavy. Banners droop from lances, and armored men trudge alongside you. These are crusaders, men who went east for faith and conquest, but are returning home with something else. Saddlebags crammed with strange scents and flavors. You fall in step, catching a whiff of cloves, nutmeg, and pepper every time a horse jostles its cargo. One knight pulls out a pouch and shakes it with a grin. "Relics," he says, but you know better. Relics fetch piety. Pepper fetches coin. The Crusaders fought for holy lands, but they're returning as spice merchants, willingly or not. You watch them boast, bragging of battles, yet the true spoils lie not in their swords, but in these tiny seeds that rattle like dice. The Crusades of the 11th, 13th centuries played a key role in introducing Western Europeans to spices from the Levant and beyond. Soldiers and pilgrims returned not only with tales of Jerusalem, but also with a taste for cinnamon, nutmeg, and pepper. The appetite lingered long after the wars ended. You pause by a campfire where a knight roasts a hare. He sprinkles it with something golden, saffron, pilfered from a monastery or traded in acre. The scent rises, delicate and intoxicating. Others gather, their mouths watering, their eyes narrowing with envy. Joke number one. One soldier mutters, "God forgive me, but this saffron smells holier than the relics I carried home." Some chronicles claim crusaders smuggled spices home-sewn into clothing linings, or hidden inside hollow sword hilts. Whether true or just legend, the image is irresistible. Armored men clanking into European ports, their cloaks rustling not with relics, but with peppercorns. Historians still argue whether the Crusaders were true carriers of spice culture, or simply accidental couriers swept along by larger trade systems. You ride with them through villages, and peasants stare wide-eyed as knights lift their pouches. They scatter a few grains of pepper into communal stews, and the reaction is pure awe. For once, peasants taste what only nobles flaunt. Children giggle at the fiery burst, mothers cross themselves, and old men shake their heads as if they've swallowed lightning. At night, the Crusaders tell stories, not of Christendom or Jerusalem's walls, but of markets where cinnamon bark towered higher than shields, and bazaars where saffron threads glowed brighter than gold leaf on icons. They speak with more passion about spice than about battles. You realize that while the Crusades were drenched in blood, their true legacy may be flavor. The caravan presses on, weary men dreaming of hearths, but their saddlebags tell another tale. Each pouch of spice will ripple outward, stirring kitchens, fueling markets, and feeding a hunger that swords alone could never satisfy. As dawn breaks, you watch a knight pause, sprinkle pepper into his wine, and grin. "Better than mass," he says. You roll your eyes, but secretly you agree. Spice has conquered him more completely than any city wall. And as you march on with this ragged band of holy warriors turned accidental spice traders, you can't help but think. History remembers their battles, but maybe, just maybe, the pepper in their saddlebags reshaped Europe far more than their swords ever did. You wander from the campfires of crusaders into the hushed chambers of medieval apothecaries, where shelves bow under jars, powders, and bundles wrapped in cloth. The air is thick with scents that clash: sharp pepper, sweet cinnamon, earthy saffron, and a whiff of something medicinal that makes your eyes water. Here, spices are not just flavor. They are healing, mystery, and sometimes magic. A healer in a long robe beckons you closer. He lifts a jar, tilts it toward the light, and you see threads of saffron glimmer like captured sunrise. He swears it lifts sadness, cures fevers, even sharpens the mind. You nod, though you're skeptical. He sprinkles a few threads into warm milk, hands you the cup. The taste is strange, floral, bittersweet, but it fills you with warmth. Maybe it's the milk, maybe it's belief. Medieval medicine leaned heavily on spices, guided by the ancient humoral theory of balancing hot, cold, wet, and dry in the body. Pepper was hot and used to stimulate digestion, while cinnamon was prized for circulation. Apothecaries kept careful stocks of these expensive imports, dispensing them to those wealthy enough to pay. You glance at another jar, this one filled with cloves. The healer explains they ease toothaches. Press one against the gum, and the numbing sting does help, at least for a while. Some physicians prescribed nutmeg as a cure for plague, claiming its warming properties drove away disease. Historians still argue whether this was genuine belief or convenient salesmanship in desperate times. You stroll deeper, and the whispers grow stranger. Lovers buy sachets of pepper mixed with honey, promising passion. Mothers beg for saffron to ease childbirth. Monks burn cinnamon in churches, calling it smoke, a purifier of souls. The line between medicine, magic, and myth blurs completely. On a shelf, you notice a book of recipes, its parchment yellowed, ink smudged. It lists remedies that range from sensible to absurd. Pepper boiled in wine for stomach pains. Cloves and honey for cough. Nutmeg under the pillow to banish nightmares. You raise a brow. Joke number one, you think to yourself, if nutmeg could really banish nightmares, half this script wouldn't exist. The apothecary lowers his voice, confessing that sometimes spices are more symbol than cure. A pinch of saffron in medicine reassures the patient, not because it heals, but because it costs dearly. Proof they've been given the best, and perhaps that belief alone is worth the price. Outside, you watch as a wealthy woman clutches her bundle of saffron like it's gold, while a poor man peers in longingly, coughing into his sleeve. The divide is cruel. Those who can afford spices receive healing. Those who cannot must trust to fate. Yet both believe, and belief has power. As evening falls, you leave the apothecary and walk through narrow streets. The scent of spice clings to you, a reminder that in this medieval world, pepper and saffron are not only taste, but medicine, talisman, and sometimes a promise that the world itself might be tamed, one grain at a time. You follow the scent of pepper down alleys, less polished than Venice's marble or Baghdad's bazaars. And you find yourself in the shadowy world of smugglers. Here, deals are struck, not under cathedral bells, but in taverns, wharves, and back rooms, where the air smells of sweat, smoke, and secrecy. A man slides a pouch across a table, the weight of it small, the value of it enormous. He leans closer, whispers, "Nutmeg from the islands, worth your life if caught." You blink. Worth your life? But yes, this is the spice trade, where greed and fear dance together. Merchants gamble fortunes. Smugglers gamble their necks. Joke number one tonight. You mutter, "All this fuss for something I sprinkle on eggnog in December." By the late Middle Ages, European demand for nutmeg, cloves, and pepper skyrocketed, and control over spice islands like Banda and Maluku became a bloody contest. Even before full-scale colonial wars, smuggling routes flourished. Officials taxed spice so heavily that avoiding tolls meant higher profits if you survived. You trail smugglers through a dark dockside warehouse. They open barrels of dried fish, but beneath the layers lies pepper, hidden like contraband treasure. Another crate, marked wool, rattles suspiciously when lifted. Inside, cinnamon sticks bound tight. Records tell of monks caught sneaking saffron across borders sewn into their robes, claiming it was for holy purposes. Historians still argue whether smugglers were rogues undermining fair trade or quiet heroes breaking monopolies that strangled poorer towns. A fight erupts in the corner, two men accusing each other of skimming spice. Knives flash, voices rise, and you back away quickly. Blood on the docks is nothing new. Spice draws it as surely as gold. Guards arrive, palms open, not for justice, but for bribes. Spice slips through their fingers as easily as water. You climb onto a small boat under cover of night. Waves slap the hull as smugglers row silently, carrying pepper across a border they dare not declare. One wrong turn and gallows await. Yet they grin, whispering of profits to come. To them, spice is freedom. To rulers, it is control slipping away. The next morning, markets open with stalls bursting. Official merchants sell pepper at absurd prices, while smugglers sidle up with quiet offers, cheaper, fresher, no tax. Housewives pretend not to hear, then slip coins under their aprons. Everyone is complicit. Everyone wants the taste of the forbidden. As you walk away, the thought lingers. Spice wars aren't just fought with swords and ships, but with shadows, lies, and desperate hands clutching small pouches. And in this twilight economy, peppercorns become bullets, saffron threads become daggers, and nutmeg seeds carry the weight of empires. You step into a world no less dazzling, but far more dangerous. The vast Ottoman Empire, where trade routes are clamped tight like a fist. The year feels different here. Banners of crescent moons ripple, soldiers guard gates with spears, and caravans wait at checkpoints where tolls are demanded with cold stares. You feel the choke immediately, the way the empire's grip squeezes Europe's hunger for spice. You shuffle along a road outside Constantinople, hearing merchants mutter curses under their breath. Every sack of pepper must be weighed, taxed, and permitted. Every pouch of saffron inspected and tallied. The Ottomans know their power. They sit astride the land routes like a giant perched on a bridge, and anyone wishing to cross must pay dearly. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the Ottoman Empire became the master of spice routes between Asia and Europe, controlling key ports and passes. You watch a Venetian trader haggle desperately with an Ottoman official. The merchant waves his arms, swears the pepper is already half rotted, but the guard simply smiles, taps his spear, and doubles the fee. The merchant slams down coins, muttering in Italian. You can almost hear the thought, better to be robbed legally than murdered illegally. Some records claim smugglers disguised peppercorns as sheep droppings to sneak them past Ottoman patrols. Historians still argue whether this was inventive genius or just an exaggerated tavern tale told for laughs. Either way, you picture some poor soldier poking through a cartload of dung and deciding he'd rather not investigate further. You wander into Constantinople's Grand Bazaar, and it overwhelms you. Arches soaring overhead, stalls crammed so tightly the air itself feels perfumed with cinnamon and sweat. Merchants shout in Turkish, Greek, Arabic, Italian. The empire thrives on this wealth, and you sense why Europe seethes with envy. Merchants grow desperate, and explorers begin whispering, there must be another way. As night falls, you climb a hill and gaze at the city glowing under torchlight. Ships bob in the harbor, their cargo locked behind imperial tariffs. You realize the Ottomans don't just control spice. They control Europe's appetite itself. They can raise a tax and starve a kingdom of flavor overnight. You mutter to yourself, if salt were taxed this high, Europeans would have given up eating altogether. The wind shifts, carrying the smell of cloves and roasted lamb. You close your eyes and you understand the resentment brewing across the continent. Spice has become not just a luxury, but a point of strangulation. And somewhere in the minds of captains and kings, a question sharpens like a blade. What if we sail around them? You stand now on a rocky shoreline, spray cold against your face. And before you stretch, ships unlike the caravans you followed across deserts. These are caravels, sleek, sharp-sailed vessels built not for short hops across the Mediterranean, but for oceans themselves. Men hurry about with coils of rope and barrels of provisions, their eyes gleaming with both fear and hope. They aren't here to pay Ottoman tolls. They're here to bypass them. You hear the words whispered by captains. We must find sea lanes of our own. The Ottoman chokehold has become unbearable. The price of spice so inflated that kings are willing to gamble on seas no European has truly crossed. You watch sailors squint at maps that are half imagination, half memory, edges decorated with sea monsters and warnings like, "Here be dragons." One sailor taps a dragon sketch and says, "Better fight this fellow than another tax collector." In the late 15th century, Portuguese navigators, led by Prince Henry's legacy, pushed down Africa's coast, seeking a sea route to India. The dream was simple: avoid Ottoman tolls, reach spice at the source, and drown Venice's monopoly. The risk? Sailing off into what many feared was an endless ocean. On the dock, a young man sharpens his knife, confiding that he's never sailed beyond sight of land. Another crosses himself repeatedly, muttering prayers. But when the captain calls, they board anyway, driven by the promise of peppercorns. That's how powerful spice is. It can shove men into the unknown. Some sailors carried nutmeg seeds as good luck charms, believing they would ward off storms. Whether superstition or comfort, they tucked them into pockets close to their hearts. Historians still argue whether such seeds actually survived voyages or whether this is sailors' lore embroidered after the fact. Still, the image lingers. A man clutching a nutmeg like a talisman as waves tower overhead. You join them as the ship sets sail. The coastline shrinks, gulls vanish, and the sea swells beneath the hull. Days stretch into weeks. The sailors ration biscuits hard as wood, sip brackish water, and sing to keep courage alive. Some whisper of reaching India, others of falling off the edge of the world. But every man knows that if they succeed, they will return with holds full of spice worth more than gold, and their names carved into history. One night, under a spray of stars, the captain leans on the railing beside you. He speaks softly, almost to himself. If the Ottomans block the land, we'll carve new seas. Pepper will guide us where faith and fear cannot. His words hang in the salt air, and you realize you're hearing the birth of a new age, an age of risk, discovery, and oceans redrawn by spice. The sails billow, the ship cuts forward, and you feel the pull of destiny. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies India, cloves, cinnamon, and pepper vines waiting. And behind you lies an empire's toll booth, growing irrelevant with every mile. You stand on the deck of a Portuguese caravel now, its triangular sails glowing white against the sunrise. The ship rolls with the swell of the Atlantic, and sailors mutter prayers as the wind carries them farther than any of them ever dreamed. Behind lies Lisbon, cramped and familiar. Ahead lies the unknown, a gamble written in salt and stars. And all of it, every risk, every prayer is for spice. The captain paces, eyes fixed on the horizon, charts clutched like scripture. He murmurs about India, pepper, cinnamon, cloves. His crew whispers of storms, scurvy, and monsters said to lurk in uncharted waters. One sailor points at a sketch of a sea serpent on the map and mutters, "If it eats pepper too, we're doomed." The others laugh nervously. In 1498, Vasco da Gama reached Calicut, India, opening the first direct sea route from Europe to Asia. It was a turning point, shattering Venice's monopoly and beginning centuries of global seaborne trade. Peppercorns and cinnamon bark now bypassed Ottoman tolls, carried straight into European harbors. You follow the crew ashore on the Malabar coast, where air hangs heavy with humidity and the fragrance of spice orchards nearly knocks you over. Pepper vines climb trees like green serpents, their berries glistening in the sun. Cinnamon bark curls in drying racks. Nutmeg and cloves fill the air with sweetness sharper than any perfume in Europe. For the sailors, it's overwhelming, the source of all their dreams laid out before them. Locals sometimes laughed at Europeans who bought pepper in absurd quantities, storing it as if it were treasure, while in India, it was just another crop. Historians still argue whether this disparity shows Europe's obsession or Asia's indifference. But to you, standing amid piles of pepper, the irony is clear. What was common here could build castles there. You watch as barrels are filled, contracts signed, and ships loaded until they nearly groan under the weight. The sailors grin, thinking of fortunes awaiting them back home. Yet you also notice the tension, muskets stacked nearby, wary glances exchanged. Trade is not pure friendship. It is negotiation, sometimes intimidation, always edged with risk. The voyage back is brutal. Storms rip sails, men fall sick, food rots. Peppercorns spill in the hold, rolling underfoot like marbles. Yet the men guard them fiercely, patching leaks, praying through the night, because they know each barrel is worth its weight in gold, enough to turn paupers into princes. At last, the Portuguese fleet sails into Lisbon. Crowds gather, bells ring, and nobles jostle for the first taste. The smell of spice floods the harbor, and you can almost feel Europe's history tilt. With one voyage, the map has been rewritten and a new age has begun. An age of exploration, conquest, and yes, obsession. You step off the deck, heart still pounding, and whisper to yourself, "Pepper has guided men across oceans, and the world will never be the same." You step off the ship and onto dry land again. Only this time, the road ahead feels strangely quiet. The dusty caravan trails you once trudged with camels now lie abandoned. Weeds creeping over, stones that once echoed with bells and hooves. Oasis that bustled with tents and laughter stand silent. Wells half empty, markets shuttered. You can almost hear ghosts of merchants haggling, but the sound fades into wind. The decline has begun by the 16th century. The overland Silk Road had lost much of its importance as sea routes dominated global trade. Portuguese, Dutch, and later English ships hauled spices directly from Asia to Europe, bypassing the caravans that once stitched the world together. Towns built on desert trade shrank into obscurity, their wealth evaporating like dew. You walk through one such town, arches crumbling, stalls bare. An old man sits outside, staring at the road with eyes that remember better days. He tells you of caravans stretching for miles, of spices so fragrant they scented the whole marketplace. Now only dust lingers. You nod, feeling the weight of history pressing down. Some abandoned caravanserais were repurposed as dens for travelers' ghosts. Or so locals claimed. People swore they heard bells and footsteps long after trade ceased. Historians still argue whether these were true hauntings or simply stories born of nostalgia. Either way, you glance nervously into the empty halls and half expect a camel to shuffle past. As you wander, you realize the irony. What once made these towns rich, spice, also led to their ruin. The hunger for pepper pushed Europe to sail oceans, and in doing so, they left the old roads to crumble. Spice both built and broke the Silk Road, you mutter. Imagine explaining to a medieval innkeeper that his business collapsed because some sailor figured out how to ride the wind better. The silence grows heavier. Dust swirls in alleys, doors hang loose, and children play in streets where caravans once jostled. Yet you know these ruins are not forgotten. They are reminders carved in stone, whispering of an age when pepper ruled kingdoms and saffron paid ransoms. You pause at the edge of the town, staring at the horizon. The sea now carries the spice story forward, but the desert keeps the memory. And as the sun dips low, painting the ruins gold, you feel the strange ache of endings. How even the greatest roads must one day fade. You return, finally, not to the desert nor the deck of a ship, but to your own kitchen table, where the story lingers in the simplest objects, the salt shaker and the pepper grinder. You twist the mill, hear the crack of peppercorns, and you remember caravans trudging across sand, galleys creaking into Venetian harbors, Portuguese ships braving storms. The sound is ordinary now, yet each crack carries centuries. By the early modern era, pepper had shifted from treasure to table staple. Once worth its weight in gold, it eventually became affordable for common households, a transformation that mirrored the rise of global trade networks and the sheer volume of spice flooding Europe. But in the Middle Ages, you recall, a pinch of pepper could silence envy in a castle hall, could buy passage across a desert, could mend a quarrel with a gift as precious as jewels. Today, you sprinkle it without thought, unaware of the roads and oceans it conquered. Some 17th century households lock their pepper mills in little cabinets with keys, fearful of servants stealing a pinch. Historians still argue whether this was paranoia or necessity. You glance at your grinder and laugh. Imagine needing a key just to season your dinner. You mutter, "If I had to unlock pepper, I'd probably just eat bland chicken and call it a day." As you sip something warm, you realize the legacy isn't just flavor, it's imagination. Spices stitched continents together, toppled monopolies, and rewrote maps. They lured crusaders, built Venice, enraged Ottomans, and launched explorers across oceans. And all of that history now rests quietly on your table, hiding in plain sight. You close your eyes, let the taste linger, and whisper to yourself, pepper was once power, saffron once treasure, cinnamon once myth. And though they've lost their crowns, their echoes remain. Every pinch is a reminder of roads long vanished, ships long sunk, and dreams that carried men farther than they ever thought possible. So here, at the end of the journey, I invite you to soften your thoughts and slow your breathing. The caravans fade into mist. The sails drift into calm seas. The markets dim their lanterns. The noise of bargaining, the clash of swords, the crackle of fire on saffron rice, all of it grows quieter until it is only memory. You're left with the simplest image, a single peppercorn resting in your palm. Tiny, unassuming, dark as night. Yet inside it lies the echo of deserts crossed, storms weathered, fortunes made and lost. It is a reminder that even the smallest things can alter the course of history, and that value often hides in plain sight. Let your mind settle on that peppercorn. See it glowing faintly in the dark, a quiet ember of a world once aflame with desire. Feel the weight of it, so light it barely stirs your hand, and yet heavy with centuries. Allow that thought to calm you, steady you, reassure you. Breathe deeply now, in, then out. Imagine the scent of spice softening the air, gentle and warm, wrapping you in comfort. The long roads are behind you, the seas have stilled, and the story has come home. As you drift, carry with you this whisper. History is never far. It lingers in the ordinary, in the spice on your table, in the quiet taste of something once priceless. You are part of that story simply by remembering it tonight. Sleep now, peacefully, as the world outside grows still. Let the peppercorn fall from your hand into dreams, rolling into the silence where all journeys finally rest. Sweet dreams.